I stood in the doorway, the cold night air wrapping around me as I watched David lean against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but the finality in his voice was clear. "You should go. Just like that. No hesitation, no demoj." I had spent the last 5 years of my life building a future with this man, believing in our dreams, sacrificing my own ambitions to help him. When he found himself drowning in debt, $500,000 no less, I hadn't thought twice. I sold my late mother's house, liquidated my savings, and worked myself to exhaustion to clear his name. And now here we were. "Excuse me." My voice was calm, but my hands trembled. David exhaled, as if I were some burden he had finally shaken off. "Look, I appreciate everything you've done, but this just isn't working anymore. I think it's best if we part ways." I blinked, struggling to process his words. "You think it's best?" He nodded, pushing away from the counter. "I've already packed your things. They're by the door." I turned my head slightly. Sure enough, a couple of suitcases sat neatly by the entrance, my life, reduced to a few bags. The betrayal settled in my chest like a boulder. I could have screamed, cried, begged for an explanation. But instead, I simply tilted my head and asked, "Forget something?" David frowned, taken aback. "What?" I stepped forward, my voice even. "You forgot that everything you have, everything in this house, is because of me." His jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" "I mean," I said, taking out my phone and tapping a few buttons, "that the deed to this house? It's in my name." Silence. I let that sink in before continuing. "The car you drive? Bought with my money." Another beat. "That business you're so proud of? I funded it." I locked eyes with him. "So if anyone is leaving, David, it's you." His face paled. "You can't." "Oh, but I can." I smirked, feeling a surge of satisfaction. In fact, I already did. I turned my phone toward him, showing the eviction notice I had just emailed to our landlord, correction, my landlord. Because while David had been busy planning his escape, I had been securing my own future. His mouth open, but no words came out. I grabbed my bags and walked toward the master bedroom, pausing just long enough to glance over my shoulder. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." And with that, I shut the door behind me, leaving him exactly where he deserved to be, stunned and alone. David stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, his mind racing. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, desperately trying to find a way out of the mess he had just walked into. I didn't wait for him to catch up. Instead, I wheeled my suitcases into the bedroom, taking my time to unzip them. It was almost laughable. He had packed my things like he was doing me a favor, like he was granting me some sort of mercy by kicking me out. He had no idea that I had been preparing for this moment for months. The first red flag had been subtle. A late-night text he had tried to hide. A dismissive tone when I asked about our future. Then, as soon as I paid off his debts, his behavior changed completely. The affection disappeared. The gratitude faded. It was as if, without the weight of financial ruin holding him down, he no longer needed me. So I started planning. I transferred assets, moved funds into accounts he didn't know about. And most importantly, I made sure that when the moment came, and I knew it would, I would be the one in control. David finally snapped out of his daze. "You're bluffing," he said, stepping toward me. I chuckled, not even bothering to look up as I folded a sweater. "Try me." He hesitated. You wouldn't do this." I turned to face him fully, crossing my arms. "I already did." He swallowed hard. I could see the panic rising in his eyes. The realization that for the first time in his life, he had backed himself into a corner with no way out. "You can't just kick me out of my own house," he snapped, his voice shaking. I raised an eyebrow. "Your house?" I reached into my bag, pulled out the deed, and held it up. "Whose name do you see here?" He clenched his jaw. I smirked. "That's what I thought." A long silence stretched between us. Then, in a last-ditch effort, David tried to regain control. He forced a laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Look, let's not do anything drastic. Maybe we should talk about this. I was overwhelmed, okay? I didn't mean." I held up a hand. "Stop." He did. "You did mean it. You thought you could use me, throw me away, and walk away with everything. And now that you realize you've lost, now you want to talk? He exhaled sharply, shoulders slumping. He had nothing left to say. I stepped past him, opening the front door. The night air was crisp, fresh, like a new beginning. You have 15 minutes to get out. He turned, eyes wide. What? You heard me, I said, leaning against the doorframe. 15 minutes. Take whatever you can carry. Everything else stays. His mouth opened like he wanted to argue. But one look at my face told him it was useless. He had lost. I watched as he scrambled, shoving clothes into a duffel bag, grabbing whatever he could. It was pathetic, really. And when he finally stepped out onto the porch, bags in hand, I gave him one last parting gift. By the way, I said sweetly, I already called a locksmith. By the time you reach the end of the driveway, your keys won't work anymore. His face turned red with anger, but there was nothing he could do. I closed the door with a satisfying click, locking out the past. Then, for the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath, free, powerful, and completely in control of my own future. I leaned against the door for a moment, listening. Nothing. No banging, no shouting, just the quiet acceptance of defeat. I peeked through the window. David stood there in the dim porch light, gripping his duffel bag, his knuckles white. For a second, I thought he might turn around, try one last desperate plea. But instead, he let out a bitter laugh, shook his head, and started down the driveway. I watched until he disappeared into the night. Then, with a sigh of relief, I turned away. The house felt different now. Lighter. Free of his presence, his manipulations, his weight. I walked into the living room and let myself collapse onto the couch. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Well played. I frowned, sitting up. My heart pounded as I stared at the message. Who the hell was this? Before I could respond, another message popped up. Unknown number. But did you really think it would be that easy? A chill ran down my spine. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. But before I could type anything, my phone rang. The same unknown number. I swallowed hard. Then I answered. Hello. Silence. Then, a low chuckle. Miss me already? David. My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice steady. What do you want? Oh, sweetheart, he sighed, his voice dripping with amusement. You really think you're done with me? I clenched my jaw. You're out. It's over. Move on. See, that's the thing. His tone darkened. I don't like losing. My grip tightened on the phone. You think you won, he continued. But you forgot one thing. I stood up, my entire body tensed. And what's that? He let the silence stretch before answering. You might own the house. But I still own you. Click. The call ended, leaving me standing there, heart pounding. I looked around the house, suddenly aware of how alone I was. And for the first time since kicking him out, I wondered if I had made a mistake. I stared at my phone, my fingers gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. The room, which had felt so light and free just moments ago, now seemed suffocating. His words echoed in my mind. I still own you. No, he didn't. I took a slow, deep breath, forcing the fear down. This was just another game to him, another way to rattle me. But I wasn't the same woman he had spent years controlling. I was done playing by his rules. Without hesitating, I blocked the number and tossed my phone onto the coffee table. Let him talk to voicemail. Let him scream into the void. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. At least that's what I told myself. But as I stood in the quiet house, a strange unease crept over me. I had planned for everything, financially, legally, practically. I had made sure I was in control. So why did it feel like I had overlooked something? I walked to the front door, double-checking the lock. Then the windows. The back door. Everything was secure. Still, that gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. Subject. Thought you'd like to see this. No sender name. Just an attachment. My stomach tightened as I tapped it open. A single image loaded on the screen. Picture of me. Taken from outside the house. My breath hitched. The angle was unmistakable. It was shot through the living room window. From the outside. Tonight. I whirled around, my pulse hammering. I ran to the curtains and yanked them shut, my breath coming fast. He was here. Or someone was. I forced myself to think. To focus. David was trying to stare me, make me second-guess myself, force me into a panic so I'd come crawling back just like he wanted. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking only slightly as I dialed. 911, what's your emergency? I exhaled, steadying my voice. I think someone's watching me. The operator asked for my address, my details. I gave them everything. Can you send someone? Yes, ma'am. A unit is on the way. Stay inside, keep the doors locked, and do not engage with anyone outside. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you. I hung up and grabbed the small safe box from under the coffee table. My fingers moved quickly as I punched in the code and pulled out the one thing I had hoped I wouldn't need. My late father's handgun. I wasn't going to be a victim. Not again. The minutes dragged on, stretching into what felt like hours. My ears strained for any sound outside. A rustling. A shadow passing by the window. Anything. Then finally red and blue lights flashed through the curtains. Relief flooded me as I ran to the door, unlocking it just as two officers stepped onto the porch. One of them, a tall, stern-looking man, nodded at me. Miss Carter. I nodded. Yes. Thank you for coming. We got a report that someone was watching you. Have you seen anything suspicious? I hesitated. Not directly. But I got this. I handed him my phone, showing him the email. He frowned, taking the phone and glancing at his partner. We'll check the perimeter. Stay inside. I stepped back as they moved around the house, flashlights cutting through the night. My heart was still pounding, but at least now I wasn't alone. Minutes later they returned. No sign of anyone now, the officer said. But the ground outside your window, there are fresh footprints. A chill ran down my spine. Do you know who might have sent this? He asked, holding up my phone again. I met his gaze, my voice firm. Yes. I swallowed. My ex-husband. The officer's expression hardened. Your ex-husband. Does he have a history of harassment or violence? I exhaled slowly. He's never hit me, if that's what you mean. But manipulation? Control? He's an expert at those. I hesitated before adding, I kicked him out tonight. After I paid off his debt. He didn't take it well. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. Did he make any direct threats? I thought about his words over the phone. You might own the house. But I still own you. The photo from outside my window. The fresh footprints. I nodded. Yeah. He did. The officer's jaw tightened. We're going to file a report and put in a request for a restraining order. In the meantime, do you have somewhere else you can stay for the night? I hesitated. This was my house. My space. I had fought for it, planned for it, taken control of my life. And now because of him I had to leave? But I wasn't stupid. I swallowed my pride. Yeah. A friend's place. Good, the officer said. Grab what you need. We'll wait outside while you lock up. I nodded and hurried to my room, throwing a few essentials into a bag. My hands shook slightly, but my mind was clear. I wasn't running, I was being smart. Before I left, I grabbed my laptop and logged into my security system. I had installed cameras a few months back just in case. I scrolled through the footage, my heart hammering. Then I saw it. A figure standing in my yard, partially hidden by the shadows. Tall. Familiar. David. I clenched my jaw. I had proof now. If he thought he could intimidate me, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. As I walked out the door, bag slung over my shoulder, I turned back for one last look. He thought he still owned me. But by the time I was done with him, he wouldn't even own his freedom. I spent the night at my friend Lisa's apartment, but I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that image. David lurking outside my house watching me. The thought that he had been that close made my skin crawl. Lisa had been supportive, furious on my behalf, already offering to help me get a lawyer. You need to end this now, she had said. She wasn't wrong. By morning I had a plan. First I called my lawyer. The restraining order was already in motion, but I wanted to take it further. I had the evidence, the call, the photo, the security footage. It was time to make sure David understood he had crossed a line. Then I called the bank. A little voice in my head nagged at me. What if he still had access to something? He had already betrayed me once. I wasn't about to let him do it again. I changed every password, locked down every account, and transferred my remaining funds to a new bank. By noon, I felt slightly more in control. But one thing still bothered me. David wasn't the type to do his own dirty work. He had always been more of a let other people fix my problems kind of guy. Which meant someone had to have helped him. I scrolled through my phone, searching for any connection I might have missed. Then my screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Should have stayed gone. Now it's going to get messy. I stared at it, my stomach flipping. A second later, my phone buzzed again. Unknown. Hope you like surprises. My breath hitched. No. No way. This wasn't just David anymore. Someone else was involved. I jumped to my feet. Lisa, I have to go. She frowned from the kitchen. What? Where? I don't know, I admitted. But I need to find out who else is pulling the strings before it's too late. Lisa crossed her arms. You're not going anywhere alone. I sighed. Lisa. No. You're being stalked, threatened, and now you're getting mystery threats? You need backup. She wasn't wrong. I took a deep breath, gripping my phone tighter. I had spent years cleaning up David's messes, paying off his debts, believing his lies. Not anymore. This time I was the one hunting him. Lisa insisted on driving, which was probably for the best. My hands were still shaking from the text. As she maneuvered through traffic, I scrolled through my contacts, searching for someone who might have a connection to David's mess. Then it hit me. Mark. He was David's old business partner, the one I thought had cut ties with him after I bailed David out of his $500,000 debt. But Mark had always been a little too loyal, a little too involved. If anyone knew what David was up to, it was him. I tapped his number and put the phone to my ear. It rang and rang. Then finally he picked up. Didn't expect to hear from you, Mark said, his voice guarded. I didn't waste time. Where's David? A pause. Then a chuckle. You tell me. You're the one who kicked him out. So he was still talking to him. I clenched my jaw. Mark, I swear if you're helping him. You think I want to help him? Mark snapped, his tone subtly sharper. You have no idea what he's been up to. That caught me off guard. Then tell me. Silence stretched for a moment. Then in a low voice Mark said, Meet me at the Rusty Anchor in an hour. Come alone. The line went dead. Lisa shot me a look. Dia, no? You're not going alone. I shook my head. He won't talk if you're there. Lisa gripped the steering wheel tighter. And what if it's a trap? I exhaled slowly. Then it's time to find out just how far David is willing to go. The Rusty Anchor was a rundown bar on the edge of town. The kind of place where bad deals happened in the dark corners. When I stepped inside, the air smelled like stale beer and regret. Mark was already there, nursing a whiskey at a back booth. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. I slid into the seat across from him. Talk. Mark sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. Look, I tried to stay out of this. But David, he's not done with you. I swallowed hard. I figured that much out on my own. No, Mark said, leaning in. Ido did it. He's mad. You humiliated him. Took away everything he thought he had control over. And now, he's desperate. I folded my arms. What's he planning? Mark hesitated. Then in a voice so low I barely heard it, he said, He owes money to the wrong people. And they think he should pay. A chill ran down my spine. Excuse me? Mark nodded grimly. David told them you're the real money. That you'd fix things, just like you always have. My stomach twisted. And if I don't? Mark stared at me, his expression dark. Then you're in more danger than you realize. I sat back, my pulse pounding. David hadn't just wanted revenge. He had sold me out. And now, I wasn't just fighting against him. I was fighting against people who wouldn't take no for an answer. I stared at Mark, my blood running cold. Who are they? My voice was steady, but my fingers clenched into fists under the table. Mark hesitated. You don't want to know. I leaned forward. I need to know. He sighed, swirling the whiskey in his glass before finally meeting my gaze. David got mixed up with a guy named Roman Kovac. Does that name mean anything to you? It did. Roman Kovac wasn't just some thug. He was the kind of man people whispered about, the kind who made problems disappear, permanently. He wasn't in the business of giving second chances. If David owed him money and promised me as payment, I swallowed. How much? Mark hesitated again, then sighed. 300 grand. My stomach dropped. That was on top of the $500,000 I had already paid off for David. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. When is he expecting it? Mark glanced at his watch. Midnight. Tonight. My pulse spiked. That was only a few hours away. David thinks if he stalls long enough, Roman will come after you first, Mark added. He's banking on you panicking and paying up. I clenched my jaw. That's not going to happen. Mark gave a dry laugh. Then you'd better have a backup plan. Because Roman's guys don't do negotiations. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Thanks for the warning, Mark. He grabbed my wrist before I could walk away. Be careful, he said, his voice unusually serious. You might have beaten David at his own game. But this is different. I yanked my hand free. I know. And I did. David had been playing games. This wasn't a game anymore. This was war. Outside, Lisa was waiting in the car, her arms crossed. Well, I slid into the passenger seat, my mind already working through 100 different possibilities. We have a problem. Lisa started the engine. Tell me something I don't know. I turned to her, my expression grim. We need to find David. Now. Lisa's hands tightened on the wheel. Where do we start? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. David was a creature of habit. He had a pattern. A routine. He thought he was smarter than everyone else. But I knew him better than he knew himself. And if I was right, there was only one place he'd be hiding. I turned to Lisa. Drive to the marina. She raised an eyebrow. David doesn't have a boat. No, I said, my jaw tightening. But Mark does. Lisa didn't ask any more questions. She just stepped on the gas, weaving through traffic like a woman on a mission. As we drove toward the marina, my mind raced. If David was hiding out there, it meant he was either waiting for news, hoping I'd cave and pay Roman's people before they came for him, or he was planning his escape. Either way, I was going to find him first. By the time we reached the docks, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the water. The marina was quiet, save for the occasional creak of boats shifting against their moorings. Lisa pulled into an empty spot. So what now? I stand the dock boats. Mark has a small yacht, the Blue Rose. David's crashed there before. If he's here, that's where he'll be. Lisa exhaled sharply. This is crazy. Ik wens ze hier. You can wait here if you want. She scoffed. Ken no. If this turns into a crime scene, I'm not letting you go in alone. I smirked despite myself. Good. Let's go. We moved quickly, keeping to the shadows. The boat wasn't hard to find. Mark's taste in luxury was obnoxiously obvious. Lights were on inside. Someone was there. I climbed onto the deck first, motioning for Lisa to stay back. My heart pounded as I approached the door. I didn't bother knocking. I just turned the handle and walked in. And there he was. David sat at the small table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of him. He looked up, and for a moment, I saw genuine shock on his face. But then, like always, he smirked, leaning back in his chair like he had all the time in the world. Well, he drawled. Didn't expect you to show up this fast. I shut the door behind me, crossing my arms. Cut the crap, David. You set me up. He sighed dramatically. Set you up? No, sweetheart. I gave you an opportunity. You always liked playing the hero. Here's your chance. I clenched my jaw. You promised Roman 300 grand in my name. David took a slow sip of whiskey. And I slammed my hands down on the table, making the bottle jump. And now he's coming for me. David didn't even flinch. That's the idea. Something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, I grabbed the front of his shirt and yanked him forward. You really think I'm going to clean up your mess again? I hissed. David's smirk faltered. You don't have a choice. I let out a sharp laugh. That's where you're wrong. Before he could respond, the boat rocked slightly, a sign that someone else had just stepped on board. Lisa's voice came from the doorway. Guys? We've got company. I let go of David and turned to look through the window. A black SUV had pulled up near the dock. 3 men stepped out, all dressed in dark suits. And at the center of them, Roman Kovac himself. David paled. Shit. I turned to him, my voice deadly calm. Yeah. Shit. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time ever I saw it, fear. Because he knew what I knew. Roman wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to collect. The boat rocked again. Heavy footsteps echoed on the dock. Roman and his men were getting closer. David shot up from his chair, panic finally cracking his smug mask. We need to go. Now. I didn't move. I just stared at him. Oh, now you want to run? David grabbed my wrist. This isn't a joke. Roman doesn't do warnings. I yanked my arm free. I know exactly who Roman is. The difference between us, David. I took a step closer. I don't run from my problems. I face them. Lisa's voice came sharp from the doorway. Yeah? Well, you might want to start facing them right now because they're here. A knock, loud and deliberate, sounded against the boat's cabin door. Open up. The voice was calm, controlled, but it carried the kind of weight that sent a chill down my spine. Roman Kovac. David looked at me, desperation in his eyes. Let me do the talking. I almost laughed. You've done enough. Another knock. More forceful this time. I exhaled slowly, steadied myself, and walked to the door. Lisa muttered a curse under her breath but didn't stop me. I turned the handle and opened it. Roman stood there, hands in the pockets of his sleek black coat. He wasn't a large man, but his presence filled the space like a storm rolling in. His dark eyes flicked over me, assessing. Then behind me to David, who was sweating bullets. Roman smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, he said smoothly, this is awkward. I crossed my arms. Not for me. One of his men chuckled at that. Roman tilted his head slightly, intrigued. You must be the woman David promised. Promise what exactly? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Roman's smile widened. Payment. David took a shaky step forward. Roman, listen. Roman lifted a finger. David immediately shut up. Then Roman turned back to me. Your husband. He said the word like it was a joke. Assured me you'd cover his debt. You understand why I can't just let this oversight slide. I nodded. Eagle. David shot me a look like he couldn't believe I wasn't groveling. Roman noticed too. You're handling this well. I shrugged. It's not my debt. Silence. Roman's men shifted slightly. The tension in the air thickened. David opened his mouth, probably to beg, but I cut him off. David told you I'd pay. I met Roman's gaze. But what if I told you he lied? Roman exhaled sharply, amused. I'd say I'm not surprised. David paled. Wait. I stepped aside, motioning toward him. Then you should take it up with him. Roman's expression didn't change, but the energy in the room shifted. His men moved forward. David stumbled back, hands up. No, wait. I can fix this. Roman sighed. David. How many times have I heard that before? David turned to me, eyes wild. Please. You can't just let them. I tilted my head. You were willing to let them come after me. He had no answer for that. Roman clapped his hands together, the sharp sound making David flinch. Well, this has been illuminating. I'll be collecting now. David started shaking. I just need time. Roman raised an eyebrow. Time? You have plenty of time. Lisa leaned in from the doorway, muttering. This is getting good. Roman turned back to me. I like you, he admitted. You've got a backbone. Not like this one. He gestured to David like he was something stuck to his shoe. So I'll make you a deal. I kept my expression neutral. I'm listening. You walk away. Right now. Let us handle him. And in return. He smiled. You're off the hook. No dates. No threats. No problems. David made a strangled noise. No. You can't just. I didn't let him finish. I extended my hand to Roman. Deal. Roman shook it, his grip firm and ice cold. David screamed my name as Roman's men grabbed him, dragging him off the boat. He fought, pleaded, cursed, but I didn't move. I just watched as they hauled him toward the SUV. Lisa let out a low whistle. Damn. Roman looked back at me. Smart choice. I nodded. I know. He gave me one last approving glance before stepping off the boat. A moment later, the SUV's doors slammed shut. The engine rumbled to life. Then just like that they were gone. I let out a slow breath, the weight of years of manipulation, debt, and betrayal finally lifting from my shoulders. Lisa clapped a hand on my back. So drinks? I laughed, shaking my head. Yeah. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free.